Welcome to the Jasmine Podcast.
Have you ever been driving on a wide-open highway for days? Like the road is totally clear, the music is playing, the windows are down, and you are just cruising along without a care in the world.
Oh, yeah, that is just the best feeling.
Right. You feel like you can drive forever, but then suddenly you hit the city limits. The brake lights flash red right in front of you, and, well, before you know it, you are stuck in this massive, noisy, unmoving traffic jam. It is incredibly jarring.
It really is.
It feels like a physical shock to your system, doesn't it?
It absolutely is a shock. I mean, your brain was entirely calibrated to just, one fast-flowing speed. And then, without much warning at all, it is forced to completely stop and process a massive flood of new, highly stressful information.
And that feeling, that sudden, overwhelming halt, is exactly what it feels like to return to normal life after a long holiday. The big celebrations are over, the parties have ended, and coming back to reality right now, in April 2026, it feels exactly like hitting that traffic jam.
Which is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. So if you are listening to us right now and you woke up feeling a bit heavy today, or if you feel empty, unmotivated, or maybe you are just staring at your work computer and feeling like you simply cannot do it, we want to tell you directly, you are definitely not alone.
You really aren't. And welcome to this special deep dive. Today we are exploring notes from a brilliant mental health and resilience series, and it's focused entirely on the post-holiday blues. Now, because you, our listener, are using this deep dive to improve your English, our mission today is really twofold.
Right.
First, we are going to clearly unpack the actual science behind why we feel so sad after a break. And along the way, we're going to explore some incredibly useful natural English phrases so you can talk about these feelings with your friends or your coworkers.
And we are going to take this deep dive nice and steady. We want to make sure the vocabulary is very clear for you, but more importantly, we want to explain the biological why behind this heavy feeling and, of course, the how of bouncing back.
Okay, so let's unpack this heavy feeling. Because before we can talk about solutions, we really have to name the problem. For a long time, I just thought I was being lazy after a holiday. I thought I just, lacked discipline. But our sources say something very different.
Yes, they do. Psychologists and neuroscientists actually have a specific biological term for what you are experiencing. It is called the post-adrenaline crash.
A post-adrenaline crash.
Well,
now, adrenaline is that chemical that gives us that big rush of energy, right?
exactly.
But I always associated a crash with, like, a computer freezing or an airplane falling. What does a crash actually look like inside the human brain?
Well, to understand the crash, we really have to look at how our brains manage pleasure and reward. And this is specifically through a chemical called dopamine. I want you to think of dopamine as your brain's natural reward system.
Okay, dopamine equals reward.
Right. So when you are on holiday, you are seeing family, you are eating wonderful food, staying up late, maybe exchanging gifts. Your brain is just flooded with dopamine. It is a massive, prolonged spike in pleasure.
Okay, so I am just swimming in dopamine during the holiday? I mean, that sounds pretty great.
Oh, it is great, temporarily. But the human brain is beautifully designed to seek balance. It relies on a concept called homeostasis. The brain really does not like being pushed to extremes for too long.
It wants to stay level.
Exactly. So to protect itself from this massive constant flood of dopamine, the brain actually turns down its own dopamine receptors. It literally makes itself less sensitive to the chemical.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Is it like, if I am listening to music that is way too loud, my ears will start to ring and they sort of muffle the sound to protect my eardrums?
That is a really brilliant analogy, yes. Your brain muffles its dopamine receptors. So think about what happens when the holiday ends. The party stops, the social events are over, the external source of the dopamine is completely gone.
Oh, I see.
But your brain's receptors are still muffled. So your baseline level of dopamine actually drops below normal. You are operating at a literal chemical deficit. Oh, wow. So when I feel sad and tired on my very first day back at work, it is a literal biological reaction. My brain is physically struggling to feel pleasure because the receptors are still turned down. It is not a personal failure at all.
Exactly. You have to remember that it is a chemical shift. You did not do anything wrong, and you are definitely not being lazy.
Oh.
But our sources do point out something really fascinating about our current reality. They highlight that this crash is uniquely difficult right now in our modern world.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually, because hasn't humanity always had a slump after a big celebration? I mean, 100 years ago, people probably felt tired after a huge winter festival, too. Why do the sources specifically warn us that this crash is so much harder right now in the year 2026?
Well, if we look at the environment of 2026, the contrast is just extreme. Today, we are constantly, chronically overstimulated. Just think about a normal workday right now. We have AI-generated entertainment, instant notifications on our phones, virtual meetings, screens just constantly competing for our attention. All right, our brains are basically running a mental marathon every single day just to process our email inboxes.
Precisely. And because our brains are already overwhelmed by modern technology, the baseline is already stressed. So when you add a massive holiday dopamine spike on top of that, and then you drop back into the high-stress, high-notification digital workplace, well, the fall feels much further. The shock to the system is much sharper than it was for people 50 or 100 years ago.
That makes a lot of sense. We are stretched so thin by technology that the drop back to reality just hurts more. Which actually leads us right into our first piece of natural English vocabulary. The sources use a very specific phrase to describe this exact biological crash.
Yes. Our first vocabulary focus for you is the phrase, the post-holiday slump.
The post-holiday slump. Let's look at the word slump. Physically, if I slump, it means my posture is really bad. Like I am sitting heavily, my shoulders are dropping forward, maybe my head is hanging low because I am just so incredibly exhausted.
Exactly. It is a very visual word, isn't it? But as a phrase, the post-holiday slump is used as a noun. It describes that entire period of low energy, mild sadness, and lack of motivation that happens in the days or weeks following a vacation.
So if I am at the office and I am just staring at my computer screen doing absolutely nothing, and my manager walks by, I could say, I am so sorry I am moving slowly today. I am really deep in the post-holiday slump.
Yes, perfect. And any native English speaker will immediately know exactly what you mean. It is a very natural, universally understood way to explain why you are not working at your usual speedy pace.
Okay, so now we understand the biology, we know about the dopamine crash, and we know we're in a slump. The really big question is, how do we get out of it? Because I will be honest with you, my first instinct when I see 400 unread emails after a holiday is to just panic.
Oh, absolutely. That is very common.
I feel guilty for resting. So I tell myself to wake up earlier, drink 3 cups of really strong coffee, and just force myself to catch up in one single day.
And that is the modern instinct for most of us, isn't it? We try to force our brains to immediately return to peak productivity. But our sources tell us that is actually the worst possible thing you can do.
Wait, hold on. You were telling me the best way to catch up on a mountain of post-holiday work is to do less. How does doing less actually help me get back on track? That sounds, well, entirely counterproductive.
It does sound counterproductive, but remember the biology we just talked about. Your dopamine system is recovering. If you flood it with stress hormones like cortisol, by panicking and drinking huge amounts of caffeine, you actually delay the recovery. The strategy the sources recommend is a concept called incremental re-entry.
Incremental re-entry. Let's break those English words down nice and slowly.
Right.
Incremental means doing something step by step or little by little.
Right.
And re-entry means entering something again, like going back into your normal routine. So it means returning to your life little by little.
Exactly. And the sources use a truly brilliant analogy here. I want you to think of a deep-sea diver, someone who is swimming deep, deep down near the ocean floor.
Okay, I have the image in my head. They are in the dark water under a massive amount of physical pressure.
Right. Now, when that deep-sea diver needs to come back to the surface, they cannot just swim straight up as fast as possible. If they do that, the sudden change in water pressure will cause gases in their blood to expand rapidly. It is a very dangerous condition. It will severely hurt them.
Oh, I see where this is going. So the diver has to swim up a few meters and then stop and let their body adjust to the new pressure, and then swim up a little more, stop, and adjust again.
Precisely. They have to rise incrementally. And the exact same thing is true for your mind after a holiday. You have been in a low-pressure zone of realization. You cannot jump straight back into the high-pressure zone of a 100% intense work week.
Right, because of the shock.
Exactly. If you try to shoot straight up to the surface and tackle all 400 emails at once, you will severely shock your mental health.
That is such a powerful way to look at it. So if I am practicing this incremental reentry, how do I communicate that to my colleagues without sounding like I am just, avoiding my work?
That is where our second piece of vocabulary comes in. A very gentle, highly professional English phrase you can use is to feel out of sorts.
To feel out of sorts. I hear this phrase a lot, but I know it can be a bit tricky for English learners to fully grasp.
It is a wonderful idiom, really. To feel out of sorts simply means you are feeling slightly unhappy, mildly unwell, or just not feeling like your usual self. The true beauty of this phrase is how polite and soft it is.
Right. Because in a professional office environment, you might not want to say, I am depressed today or I am severely anxious. Those words are very heavy and they can make people a bit uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly.
But if you walk into a meeting and say, please excuse me if I'm a bit quiet today, I am just feeling a little out of sorts, people respect it immediately.
It is the perfect way to explain that your energy is just a little bit mixed up while you are slowly adjusting, just like that deep sea diver. And as you allow yourself that time to slowly rise to the surface, you will eventually find your rhythm again. Which brings us smoothly to our third essential phrase.
And this one is very common in American and British workplaces. The phrase is, to get back into the swing of things.
Get back into the swing of things. Let's look at the imagery there for a moment.
I always picture a child on a playground swing. When you first sit on a swing, you have to pump your legs really hard. It feels awkward and heavy.
Yeah.
You are trying to find the momentum.
Yes.
But once you finally find the rhythm, it feels effortless.
Yeah.
You're just swinging back and forth naturally.
That is a really fantastic image. To get back into the swing of things means to return to your normal routine after a break and to finally feel comfortable and confident with it again. The sources provide a great example of how to use this in a sentence. Imagine you are talking to a colleague on a Tuesday morning. You might say, I am getting my emails done, but it is taking me a few days to get back into the swing of things after the long weekend.
It acknowledges that the rhythm is not quite there yet, but you are actively working on finding it. Now, this whole idea of the deep sea diver, of slowly adjusting and finding your rhythm, it naturally leads into a much broader concept mentioned in our notes. It is a word that dictates how we handle these emotional crashes overall.
And it is a word that we often deeply misunderstand in modern society. That word is resilience.
Yes, resilience. Now, normally when I hear the word resilience, society tells me it means toughness. I imagine a thick brick wall that never, ever breaks. We think being resilient means never crying, never complaining, and always pushing through the pain no matter what.
But our sources argue that this definition is actually quite harmful. Resilience is not about being a rigid brick wall. It is much more like a willow tree that bends in the strong wind but does not break. True resilience is not about never falling down. It is about how gently you pick yourself back up.
How gently you pick yourself back up. I want to really highlight that word for our listeners. Gently, not angrily.
Yeah.
Not punishing yourself because you are in a slump. Gently.
Exactly. The sources note that learning to look at your to-do list and say, it's okay that I am not at 100% today, is actually considered a high-level emotional skill. Being flexible with your own expectations is the true marker of resilience.
I love that so much. And practicing that flexibility sets up our fourth and final vocabulary phrase beautifully. The phrase is, to pace oneself.
To pace oneself. Let's break that down. The word pace refers to the speed or the rhythm at which you do an activity. Therefore, to pace oneself means to do something at a steady, careful speed rather than rushing so that you do not exhaust yourself before the task is finished.
Think about running a long-distance race. If you sprint as fast as you physically can the moment the race begins, what happens? You will completely run out of energy and collapse long before you reach the finish line.
Yeah.
But if you pace yourself, if you choose a slow, steady jog, you will comfortably reach the end.
Our sources offer a great, simple piece of advice using this exact phrase. They suggest telling yourself, and you can repeat this, don't try to finish everything today, pace yourself.
That is such vital advice for surviving the post-holiday slump. If you have 400 emails, just answer 50. Pace yourself. Leave the rest for tomorrow. So, this brings us to the big question. What does this all mean for you, the listener, today? How do you take these new English phrases and this science about dopamine and actually apply them to your afternoon?
Well, it starts with a vital psychological shift from our source notes. A shift in how you view your own self-worth. Our sources state very clearly, your worth as a human being is not measured by your output or your productivity during a blue day.
Let's just sit with that for a second, because we live in a world that constantly tells us our value is tied to how much we produce, how many reports we write, how clean our house is, how much money we make.
But during this dopamine crash, you must separate your worth from your work. Just because you did not accomplish a dozen tasks today, it does not mean you are a bad or lazy person. The goal right now, during this slump, is simply to find tiny moments of joy in the mundane, everyday things.
And to help you do that, our sources provided a weekly challenge that we want to pass on directly to you. We challenge you to choose just one analog activity today.
Now, analog is essentially the opposite of digital. It means an activity that exists purely in the physical world. It does not use a computer, a smartphone, or an AI screen.
Exactly. We want you to step away from the notifications. For example, you could go into your kitchen and make a simple cup of tea. But the challenge is to do it without having your phone in your hand.
Just stand there and watch the water boil. Notice the steam. Smell the tea leaves. Feel the physical warmth of the ceramic cup in your hands. Ground yourself in the physical senses.
Or, if you prefer, you could take a real physical paper journal and a pen and write down just a single sentence about how you are feeling. The activity itself doesn't matter, as long as it is slow and completely disconnected from the digital world.
And as you do this analog activity, we want you to practice your English by repeating a gentle phrase in your mind. Think of it as your internal thought process for the day. Tell yourself, I am easing back in.
I am easing back in. To ease into something means to enter it softly, without rushing. Just like that deep-sea diver slowly floating up to the surface.
Right, and by doing this slow analog activity, you lower the immense pressure on your brain. You allow your dopamine levels to stabilize naturally without the harsh, sudden shock of constant digital demands.
You know, talking through all of this raises a really interesting question for me. We learned today that modern technology makes the post-adrenaline crash much worse. The contrast between a restful holiday and our hyper-connected 2026 digital work life is just too sharp. The drop is simply too steep.
It is an incredibly steep drop, yes.
So, if that is true, I want to leave you, our listener, with a provocative thought to ponder on your own. What if we completely changed how we end our holidays? Could intentionally scheduling low-tech, analog days before a holiday even ends actually train our brains to prevent the post-holiday slump altogether?
That is a truly fascinating concept. You are suggesting that instead of looking at your phone and panicking on the final Sunday evening of your vacation, you intentionally introduce the quiet routines of normal life a few days early. You essentially build a psychological bridge between the holiday and the work week.
Exactly. Think of it like being the driver on that highway we talked about at the very beginning. You can see the massive traffic jam miles ahead of you. You don't keep your foot on the gas and then slam on the brakes at the very last second.
Right, that would be a disaster.
You slowly, gently begin to tap the brakes. You reduce your speed gradually.
It gives your mind the space to pace itself before the external pressure even begins. It is proactive resilience.
Right. So as you go through the rest of your day, remember to practice your new English phrases in context. If you need to, tell a colleague you're feeling a bit out of sorts. Remind yourself that it takes time to get back into the swing of things. Go make it that cup of tea without your phone, ease back in, and above all else, please remember to be kind to your mind.
We will leave you with that thought. Keep pacing yourself.